Welcome back to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into what just might be the most profound historical mystery of the human mind. We're going to investigate a 2,600-year-old scientific breakthrough, literally a blueprint for human liberation, that was completely hijacked and essentially hidden by history. Let's jump right in. Seriously, think about this for a second. What if the absolute ultimate cure for human misery was actually hijacked by politicians? It sounds like the plot of a historical thriller, right? But that is precisely what happened to the original discoveries of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Because, he didn't actually intend to start a religion. Instead, he found a completely reproducible, highly practical, neuropsychological cure for the corrupted human mind. He looked around, observed that humanity was trapped in these endless cycles of dissatisfaction and self-destruction, and he dedicated his entire life to uncovering the absolute mechanics of that suffering.
So, let's get into Section 1, the ultimate human cure.
Here's the really crucial part to understand. Ethical corruption isn't framed here as original sin or some sort of unavoidable mystical destiny. No, it's framed as a literal brain disease. It's a vicious loop that completely hijacks our perception. But, because it's a loop, it can actually be broken through what is called the neuroplasticity of ethics. The goal wasn't some mystical escape from reality or a promise of a better afterlife. Not at all. It was about actively rewiring the physical brain to eradicate corrupted patterns right here, right now. It's all about restoring the human being to a fully uncorrupted state where you naturally just desire to contribute positively to humanity.
Moving right along to Section 2, 5 Steps to Rewiring.
Okay, so this is definitely not just abstract theory. It's a rigorous, step-by-step psychological treatment. Step 1 is the philosophy. You have to understand that evil actions are fundamentally neuropsychologically self-destructive. Step 2 is active application in your daily life. Every single social interaction, every facial expression has to be guided by the intention to benefit humanity in order to actually rewire the brain. Now, Step 3 acknowledges that, yeah, you will fail, but you have to overcome those failures mindfully, asking yourself exactly why a corrupted pattern was triggered instead of just sitting around blaming yourself. Step 4 is reflecting deeply on the consequences. This is where the philosophy moves from being just an intellectual theory to an unshakable inner trust, simply because you actually feel the very real results of your actions. And finally, Step 5, disidentifying from evil actions. Once you achieve mastery here, these corrupted brain circuits simply fall dormant. They're literally like unused software that just no longer fires, and the temptation to do harm completely ceases to exist.
Which brings us to Section 3, the continuous daily commitment.
Look, running this mental antivirus software, it is absolutely not a part-time hobby. It requires immense, radical honesty. The most common problem for people is inconsistency, right? Taking one step forward and 10 steps back. To actually break free from the virus of the mind, you have to filter every single social interaction, every word and every thought through an uncompromising filter. You have to ask, does this benefit humanity? Does this fulfill my duty? Does this avoid unnecessary conflict? If an action doesn't serve a higher purpose or avoid unnecessary conflict, it literally just has no place in your life.
And when you actually apply that uncompromising filter continuously, a profound transformation occurs. You become fearless because absolutely no external force can control you, and you're no longer frantically chasing external validation. You become unshakable, rising above petty conflicts with wisdom rather than giving in to anger, and you become completely mission-oriented. Every single moment has meaning. This is the highly empowered state that naturally emerges once the mental virus is fully cleared. It is the absolute mastery of yourself in the service of humanity, where you end up contributing far more to the world than you ever consume.
Now here's where the story takes a massive twist. Section 4, the unfortunate historical deviation.
So how in the world did such a perfectly practical scientific cure morph into a mystical religion? Well, it happened through a really rapid succession of political interventions. We start 2,600 years ago with the discovery itself. But then, by the 4th century BCE, the arrival of Alexander the Great's forces completely destabilizes India. This massive societal shock paves the way for ruthless empire building, ideological Trojan horses, the fracturing of the original teachings into 18 distinct schools, and eventually a rigid state-enforced orthodoxy under Emperor Ashoka.
Enter Chanakya. This guy was the master strategist of the Mauryan Empire, and he was seriously alarmed by the pacifism that was spreading through the population. He firmly believed that a non-violent society was one that could be easily conquered. But rather than using brute force to crush the movement, he executed a brilliant, albeit manipulative, ideological Trojan horse. He literally declared the Buddha an avatar of the Hindu god Vishnu, which subtly smuggled the metaphysical concept of rebirth right back into the teachings. Almost overnight, original metaphors were suddenly being taken literally, and the entire focus shifted away from present-day psychological rewiring toward future-oriented, mythological promises. It was a remarkably quiet, but entirely devastating ideological conquest.
That sets the stage perfectly for Section 5, King Asoka's political takeover. Now, Emperor Asoka is almost always celebrated as this incredible patron of Buddhism, especially following the unimaginably bloody Kalinga War. But if we look historically at what actually happened, Asoka met a novice monk from a fractured school and fully embraced a deviated, highly nihilistic interpretation of the doctrine. And think about it, for an emperor, this was incredibly useful. If you can convince a conquered people to adopt a doctrine that actively diminishes their personal agency and promotes passive detachment, well, they are infinitely easier to govern. The teachings basically became a strategic tool for imperial control through ideology.
To completely lock this power dynamic in, Asoka convened the Third Buddhist Council. But don't let the name fool you. This wasn't some open, democratic assembly seeking universal truth. It was a political purge. Led by Elder Mogaliputatissa, the council systematically suppressed rival schools, permanently expelled competing thinkers, and strictly enforced a single state-approved orthodoxy. This effectively erased all the alternative insights and permanently cemented the deviation right into the structural DNA of what later became known as Theravada Buddhism. The original methodology of mental purification was totally overshadowed by rigid doctrines that had to be fiercely believed and defended.
When we actually put the two side by side, the difference is just stark. The original discovery was entirely practical and psychological. It was a neuroplastic rewiring aimed specifically at creating fearless, ethical action in the present moment to serve humanity. But through historical fragmentation, political canonization, and outright ideological suppression, it was forcefully transformed into the deviated dogma, a mystical religion hyper-focused on literal past lives, passive detachment, and future-oriented salvation. What was originally meant to cure the very deepest ailments of human nature tragically became just another layer of misunderstanding.
So, what do we do with this information today? Section 6. Reclaiming the Lost Discovery.
The absolute most vital takeaway from this entire explainer is that the original blueprint actually still exists. Beneath all those centuries of political maneuvering and religious distortion, the original science of the mind remains remarkably, almost unbelievably sound. By truly understanding the neuroplasticity of ethics, applying radical self-awareness, and committing to actually benefiting humanity, we can absolutely break our own vicious loops. It always starts with just one person. So I'm going to leave you with a final question to chew on. Will you be the one to strip away the historical distortions and use this ancient blueprint to heal yourself, and by doing so, spark a massive wave of collective awakening? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.